Hello, everyone. Welcome to Megaport Live Tech Drop-ins. We try to do these every Friday around the lunch hour, at least on the East Coast. Thanks for joining us. We kind of get to pick topics as they come by our mind, I guess, from a solution architect standpoint. And so this morning or today, we're going to be talking about Azure specifically, and specifically QinQ. And what I mean by that is ExpressRoute and how to interface with ExpressRoute. And so that'll be the topic today. If you use Azure, this might be interesting to you. If you don't, maybe it'll be educational and you can learn about it a little. So thanks for stopping by. Like I said, we do these every week. So if this particular topic's not super important to you, please do join us next week. And actually, we might be off next week, so it could be the week after, but stay tuned for the next Megaport Live Tech Drop-In. So let's get into it. We're going to be talking about specifically Azure ExpressRoute, how VLANs are treated, what we would call 802.1 AD or VLAN QinQ 802.1Q. And so we want to just kind of set a foundation first. I'm going to kind of throw some drawings at you, and then we're going to go into the Megaport portal and show you specifically how Megaport handles QinQ and how we give you some options to tweak those settings to make this easier for our customers. So I'm going to actually start let you know, I have my Azure account up here. I did create an ExpressRoute prior to the call. Sometimes this does take about 5 minutes to spin up, so I didn't want to sit on here with silent air waiting for this to spin up. So I do have an ExpressRoute created, and this will be helpful for the demo. I also want to show you some real quick documentation from Azure just to explain the overall topology. So this, every cloud provider has kind of a unique way of interconnecting with private connections. And Azure specifically just want to cover kind of their terminology just so we're on the same page. Microsoft Azure says, ExpressRoute, this is their solution or their product to connect into the Azure environment with private connectivity. So versus over the internet, of course. And so when you turn up what they call an ExpressRoute circuit, what that comes with is two connections, and they call it a primary and secondary connection. Now, I am an old school network guy, so when I think of a circuit, I think of that as maybe a point-to-point between two endpoints. Well, what Azure calls a circuit is a connection. So just keep that in mind. The circuit itself is more of a product family that includes both connections. So these are going to be two separate interfaces into the what they call Microsoft Services Edge or the ExpressRoute Edge. And these are actually two different routers on the Microsoft side. So there's a router connecting the primary connection and a router connecting the secondary connection. And these are totally isolated and separate data paths. So primary and secondary connection. So this is an important note that a single ExpressRoute circuit does come with both of those connections. And when you go into a network provider like Megaport, these are going to typically come across as two separate connections, what we call VXCs or virtual connections. And that would equate to the primary and secondary here. Now, within that, you'll notice there's some red line and blue line that Microsoft indicates here. One of them is going to be your standard VNets, and this is what we see a lot of, right? So they call it Azure Private Peering, connectivity to VNets, connectivity to vHub, vWAN, those kinds of things. This is into the IaaS space on the Azure network. And I would say maybe 80% of my customers, this is all they use, right? So when they use ExpressRoute, they connect to their private resources within Azure, and they use that particular peering type only. And then the other type of peering that you can turn up with ExpressRoute is called the Microsoft peering. And this is where all the public resources sit. So this might be storage resources, it could be database services, many other options in here, of course. And if you needed to directly connect to those resources, you could do that using ExpressRoute and turning up what's called Microsoft peering. And these peering sessions sit within the ExpressRoute circuit and specifically within the primary and secondary connection. So you can see on this drawing specifically, I have one circuit, but potentially up to 4 peerings, BGP peers on one circuit, okay? Now, from a carrier perspective, I would consider this 2 circuits, but it's a primary connection and a secondary connection, and then two VLANs within there. All right, so that's just to get our terminology squared away, consistent with what Microsoft uses. That's what we're going to be talking about today. All right, so before I get into the kind of the demo environment, I want to show you some topologies. Now that we have kind of the Megaport logos on here, you can see off to the right, I'm referencing that primary connection and the secondary connection. This is one ExpressRoute circuit into Microsoft. And what I'm showing you first is probably the most common configuration that I see, which is what's called single peering. Typically, it's going to be private peering into Microsoft, and a customer wants only 802.1q or a single VLAN tag. This is probably the most common because all equipment, all network equipment supports this type of configuration. So you set up a sub interface on a router, or you're setting up a trunk interface on a switch, and you could support passing a VLAN tag off to Megaport. And then we could do the magic on our network to interface with Microsoft. Now, one thing to note while I'm looking at this drawing, off to the right here on the Azure network, I always have 2 tags. And so there's what I'm referring to as the S tag, a service provider tag, and then the C tag. Okay, so the S tag is going to be associated with that ExpressRoute service. And it's kind of the higher level or the parent tag, the outer tag. And it will always be on every frame that gets passed to Azure. And then the inner tag is the C tag, and this is going to equate to the peering type within Azure. So this will be private peering, for example, and there'll be a VLAN associated with that. Now, in this example, I'm using VLAN 200 on the peering, and on the left side of the drawing, this is the data center. I'm going to turn up a Megaport right here indicated, and I'm going to use 2 different VLANs, one for the primary connection and one for the secondary connection, but I am not going to use 802.1q, or I'm sorry, I'm not going to use QinQ. I'm going to have Megaport basically pop that outer tag off to simplify the configuration in the data center. All right, so we'll hop into the portal and we'll show you that configuration. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my data center and create a port. And so I'm going to do this all in Atlanta just to keep this simple. And I'm going to use my data center here in Data Bank. And we'll do a 10 gig port speed. And I will actually do diverse ports, good habit to make sure you have diversity, if not with Megaport, with making sure you have carrier diversity of some sort. And so I'm going to do diverse ports here, 2 different diversity zones. So we'll call this port 1, port 2. And that looks good. We'll go ahead and add those ports. All right, so this is going to be the physical handoff in the data center. You see it here in my shopping cart. And we'll go ahead and order that. And so what you're looking at right here, this is the production network. So if you don't have a Megaport account today, this is I could probably give you a quick overview, but when you launch into here, you're going to get into the dashboard. This will show you all of your Megaport services globally. You can see your ports, your cloud routers, your virtual edges, all your VXCs or virtual cross connects. This is a demo account, so of course there's many services turned up in here. I'm going to just kind of focus on these 2 ports that we just turned up here. And you can see once the port is up, in about a minute or two, you're going to see an LOA pop in here, and that would be handed over to the data center for the physical cross connect. But on this port, I can build up to 100 connections. And today, of course, we're going to build the connection to Azure. So what we'll do is just use the shortcut link here, and we're going to use Microsoft Azure. And I'm going to simply go and grab that service key from the ExpressRoute I already created before the call. We'll copy that guy. Paste that service key in. And right now, just so you guys know kind of what's going on in the background, is we're just doing an API call to Azure, see where the service key was created. In this case, it was created in Atlanta. It's going to say, hey, between my data center and data bank here on the left, I have a blue diversity zone, and I can connect to Azure at this Equinix facility, and it's approximately 1 millisecond away from a network performance perspective. And so I'm going to go ahead and connect, in this case, to the secondary port because I want to keep my zone diversity intact. So I'm going to connect the blue to the blue, and then I'll do the red to the red. So here we go. That's our point-to-point circuit. And if you notice, this is the secondary connection so that when we looked at that Azure drawing, one ExpressRoute circuit, but I'm connecting to the secondary connection right now. So I'm just going to call this ER secondary VXC. Okay, so like I mentioned, this is where we get into the VLAN options here. Now, I'm not going to worry about the rate limit. I set my ExpressRoute at 50 meg. It pulls that in to Megaport via the APIs, so I can see that here, 50 meg populated. If you create a bigger ExpressRoute, of course, those values would be different. But here I get to the VLAN. Okay, so there's a couple of toggles in here that you'll notice. You'll notice the one at the top. This is the AN VLAN. And then you'll notice down here, this is the Azure side. And so what I want to do is, like I mentioned, this is the most common configuration that our customers use, is they'll check this box, which is configure a single Azure peering VLAN. And I want to use VLAN 200. And this is going to be my private peering VLAN that I'm going to use in the Azure portal. And then on this side of the network, let me go back to my drawing here, make sure I get my VLANs right. I'm going to use the secondary connection, and I'm going to call this VLAN 101. And so we'll go back into portal, and we'll call this 101. So on the data center side, I'm going to be interfacing on my router sub-interface 802.1q VLAN 101. And then when I do my configuration in Azure, I'm going to want to use VLAN 200. And this will be all set to go. So there's my price, 12-month term. That looks good. I'm going to hit next, hit add. And you could see the configuration loaded in the cart, and it's kind of shown in a drop down here. I'm going to go ahead and push this through just so we can get this order going. The interface with Azure does sometimes take 2 or 3 minutes, so we'll kind of kick this off while we continue to talk here. All right, we'll hop back in there in a minute. So yeah, so what you'll notice on the Microsoft side, so we're in the Azure portal again. I'm in my ExpressRoute circuit. You'll notice this status here, provider status not provisioned, right? So this means I've generated my service key, but nothing's happened between Azure and the service provider, Megaport in this case. So they're waiting for Megaport to provision the ExpressRoute, and that's the activity that's going on now. So in a couple of minutes, we should see this status change. Once this status changes, I can then go in and configure my peering. And so we'll hop back in here in a minute, like I mentioned, and look at that. Back here in the Megaport portal, I got my secondary connection, Atlanta secondary, ER secondary VXC. And now I'm going to do the same thing, but on the primary connection. So same ExpressRoute circuit on the red port now. And I'm going to paste in the exact same circuit ID or the service ID that I used before. That. There we go. Okay. So this time though, we're going to connect to Azure Primary, and you'll notice red to red just to keep the colors the same. And we'll just call this VXC ER Primary. And I'm going to do the same thing, except this time I'm going to use VLAN 100, just so I have a different VLAN in the data center. But on the Azure side, I want to use VLAN 200. It's important to note that with Azure, I can't have those connections have different VLAN IDs. So you'll notice when I configure the peering here in a minute, it's only going to give me the option for one VLAN. And in this case, it's going to be VLAN 200. So what I can't do is on that second connection that I built, I can't go in there and use a different VLAN than 200. The traffic won't pass if you do that. Now, if you do make that mistake, no worries. With Megaport services, you can go in there, edit what you need to fix the VLAN issue. All right, so this looks good. It's set up. Let's go over here. Okay, you can see provider status is now switched over to provisioned. It still says initiate in here, so sometimes it just needs a refresh. But this is, this ExpressRoute circuit should be ready here to start configuring the peering. Also note when I go back here into the portal, the LOAs are now ready. You probably saw those hyperlinks. So these would be passed over to the data center for the physical cross connect in the data center. But those are ready to go. So those ports are lit and ready to go. And then obviously the connections into Azure, they're going to stay in this kind of gray status until the light is seen from the customer's router, from the customer switch facing Megaport. But they are actually being configured on the network. So that's why we can continue the configuration here. I'll see oh, good. Okay, so they're ready. So if you go in here early before the provisioning process, all of this will be grayed out. You won't be able to do anything. But this is where you would do your peering configuration. So this is your BGP configuration. So you'd put in your AS number for the router in the data center. You would assign an IP block. So, I can kind of pick one to assign here. We'll just pick a random IP block here. Not a great assignment that I'm picking, but it'll get the job done. And then this is what I was talking about is the VLAN ID, which is, in this case, has to be VLAN 200. That's what I put in the Megaport portal. And then if you want a BGP password encryption on the BGP session, you can put a pre-shared key in there. I'll just leave it blank. And then we'll save the peering. Okay, excellent. All right, so once that saves, we'll be ready to go. Basically, what we've configured here is a single 802.1q configuration with Azure. Now, what comes up is customers then, let's say they either are, maybe they're only using private peering, or they're using private peering to start with, but then they want to add Microsoft peering. They're going to have a couple of options. One is I can continue to use 802.1q and add a new connection off of this same port. So I would just change the name of this one, and I would call this private peering secondary, and I would call this private peering primary, and I'd add a new connection to Microsoft off the same port, and I can continue to use 802.1q. However, if I wanted to use QinQ and use the same connection, I could do that as well. And so that's what I'll kind of show you next. But keep in mind, the caveat here is the equipment has to support QinQ. Okay, so make sure the equipment on this side supports QinQ. If it does, then this configuration will work out well for you. So let me change this to slideshow mode. Azure side. So I got now a VLAN 200, which is my private peering. No change there, right? I already set that up, but now I want to add Microsoft peering, and I want to put it on VLAN 300. And you can see I'm going to have a primary connection and a secondary connection to the Microsoft peering. I want to use the same ExpressRoute circuit, of course. So I'm going to have 4 peers total once I'm done. And then on the Megaport side, I now want to pass QinQ traffic. So I got to make some changes on how the VLANs are configured. Okay. So today I've passed VLAN 100 and VLAN 101, which you can see equates to here and here. But I need to make one change in the portal so that the outer tag and the inner tag are both passed through. So in this case, you're going to get a frame with 2 tags on it. The outer tag, which could stay the same, VLAN 100, VLAN 101, but we're going to, instead of pop and replacing a tag, we're going to be just passing the C tag through the network to your equipment. So you'll be able to peer directly with that peering. All right, so I'm going to hop back into the Megaport portal. I have my 2 connections up here. This is going to be relatively simple. I come into my connection. This is, of course, my secondary connection into Azure. I'm on VLAN 101 still. But what I want to do instead is uncheck this here. And basically what we're doing, because we don't see the C tag, or Megaport no longer sees the C tag in this case, we don't really even need to know what that is. So we're just going to save this configuration. Now you could see that it may take 2 minutes to basically the configuration to take place on the network. So obviously, if you're doing this, wait a couple of minutes before you try the configuration out. But in really quick amount of time, those VLANs will be adjusted on the network. Now this is set up with an outer tag of 101 and an inner tag of Megaport doesn't care, but in this case, VLAN 200 is still sitting on there because it's configured on the Azure side. And we can see the Azure configuration here. And if you ever forget, you can hop in here and see what your VLAN is. Okay, so that's, let me go back here. So that's set up now, QinQ to Azure. The benefit of this is now I can do multiple peering, and I don't have to buy any more connections, right? Any more virtual connections from Megaport. I don't have to buy an additional ExpressRoute circuit. I can do all of that on the same ExpressRoute circuit, the same connections. All I'm doing is adjusting how the VLANs are handled. Now, if you wanted to, some of my customers want to keep the peering separate. So they have 2 ExpressRoutes, one that just does private peering, and they have one that just does Microsoft peering. The benefit of that, of course, is that that bandwidth that you allocate for that ExpressRoute circuit is dedicated to that peering type. So if you think about it, this scenario, there's a potential that a particular peering, right? So a particular peering, private peering, Microsoft peering, could consume the entire ExpressRoute circuit and cause some data contention on the network. So something to consider. You could certainly take advantage of this from a cost perspective, but sometimes it may make more sense to just turn up 2 ExpressRoute circuits and use the more simpler configuration, which is just the single .1Q, where Megaport basically pops off that S tag and swaps out the inner tag to whatever you want it to see here. All right, I'm going to just really quick check to see if there's any questions. I didn't really have any other big topics today. I know we allocate about 30 minutes. We're a little bit short of that, so I'm just gonna check the queue here. Looks good. I don't see any questions in the online queue. Okay, well, that's all I had today. If you do have any questions as you go forward, please reach out to us. You can hit us up on the website. You can go to megaport.com, hit us up there. We got a little chat bot there. If you already have an account team, please feel free to reach out to us. We also have a great docs page. So if you go to docs.megaport.com, everything I talked about today, you can go there and look at screenshots. We talk about QinQ configuration on the docs page, so you can read a little bit more about that. We'd be happy to connect you personally and get on a call together and go through some of these configurations that are more specific to your environment and help you out with those. But otherwise, have a great Friday. Thanks for stopping by.